Back to another episode of Debt Nation, where we are busy putting death out of business. I'm your host, Steel Archer, and today we have a very special guest from Dave Lee from huge YouTube channel concentrates on China. We've had Dave Lee on before. He's the China guy. Thank you very much, Dave, for taking your Sunday. It's Sunday here in Australia. It's a very thank you so much for coming out on a Sunday to talk about China. Now, lots of interesting things happening in China. Oh, thanks to our sponsors as well, Thrivous and I Am Transhuman. Thank you to both of you for supporting this channel and this episode. Now, lots of news coming out of China at the moment. I mean, let's state the obvious here. Tariffs were first, the trade wars, and then we had the coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus happened simultaneously for the economy at a good time and a bad time. The bad being this the Lunar New Year, when millions of people are moving around. The good thing for the economy is that there was already planned shutdown of factories, which means that the economy didn't suffer as much because the inventory stocks were already high, etc. So we haven't really seen rumblings in the economy as much as we thought, although they are injecting a lot of money into the stock market, $71 billion at last count, to keep the stock market afloat. Dave, thank you for coming on Debt Nation. You know, what's happening in China right now? What's going on? What's happening? I mean, we've got trade wars, we've got coronavirus. What else is going on? Talk on anything you want.
Oh, well, I guess the media's covered most of what's going on, but the information that's coming out of China isn't exactly accurate. They've been, I guess, in the first, say, second week in January, they started arresting doctors for reporting that this is a possible SARS outbreak, and one doctor has recently become famous because he was arrested, then he died of the coronavirus. They've changed the name of the coronavirus so that they don't insult the Chinese people. The information coming out of China isn't exactly accurate. I have a contact in Wuhan right now, stuck in Wuhan still to today. My contact hasn't left home in a month, and he's ordering food online, and sometimes it takes 6 days. The first six days were the toughest because just living off supplies in the cupboard, really, and just ordering food now online and trying to wait it out. If you believe what the Chinese media is saying, it's not that bad. But if you have a look at footage of Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, some of the major cities, they've got the footage of the city and how busy the city was, say, 12 months ago. People walking around the streets, cars, trains, buses, etc. Now you can look at live footage of these cities and they're like a ghost town. It's like something very serious happened, and I think that's a reflection of the Chinese people not trusting their own government. If they don't trust their own government, why the hell does the Australian government trust the CCP?
Well, that is a big question. Why do a lot of Western governments trust the CCP? It's always been a big question, and you know, it's kind of this notion of money before people. I think it boils down to the CCP brings in a lot of cash for Australia through our exports and our education imports, and you know, they put that ahead of people, you know, and I think that's what's been going on. But what do you think? Why does the Australian government you know, trust the CCP as much as they do? Is it cash before people, or is it something else?
The amount of immigration coming to the country has slowly been increasing, and once someone has come to Australia, especially in the early days, say the 80s, they would go to university. Their parents back home would support them and spend a lot of money, especially the exchange rate from whatever country they came from in Asia. And then they would eventually get permanent residency and citizenship, and then they have the right to vote. As soon as they have the right to vote, instead of just doing the right thing for Australia and getting a good job and doing what most Australians do, they instantly become political because they want to bring the rest of their family over to Australia. And they have created all of these groups within Australia that will work against the best interests of the Australian people. The thing is that all of these groups within Australia are trying to influence our government, and they have power because the Australian people are, well, allowing it to happen, and they're not speaking up and they're not fighting back. And immigration just continues to come into this country, and they're pretty much just taking what they can while the going's good, and they always have the option of going back to their own countries.
So,
We don't.
so Dave, so the big story has been the coronavirus, and like you were saying, they're shutting down cities. Manufacturing is hurting. Global trade is down. What do you think? What does this mean for the CCP, and what does this mean for Xi Jinping as a person? Xi, he's politically purged his opponents from the old government, and now he's sort of standing atop the political pile on his own. But the thing is, when the wrath of the Chinese people come down, and I'm seeing more and more, and I'm seeing it on your channel, and I'm seeing it on others, more and more there are these protests against the government and their handling of this crisis. China has historically been a nation that fractures. It revolts against itself. It goes into these tribal states. It attacks itself. It reconsolidates a little bit. Do you think that Gigi himself is in danger, or the CCP as a party is in danger? Is this a new revolutionary moment, or is this something that the CCP can handle and Xi can handle, and they'll all come out of this A-OK on the other side?
There was a period of about a week where Xi Jinping actually disappeared. And people were talking about him actually disappearing because he was worried about the coronavirus. So he went into hiding. There were no interviews online. He wasn't turning up to any meetings, nothing. I have come full circle with my analysis of China when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party. If China was to be a democracy, China would be, the Chinese people would have the ability to vote and influence their governments to do their bidding, pretty much. It wouldn't be an empire like it is now, a dictatorship. I believe that this dictatorship is in fact keeping China, this monstrosity of a country, at bay from committing some of the most heinous human rights atrocities that this country is capable of. And the reason why I've come full circle is that I'm seeing the Chinese people leaving China and doing such awful things to Western countries from within. Imagine what would happen in their own country if they
To China.
an island nations geopolitically it is weaker. China is a behemoth. It's the biggest, most powerful country in the world. So for instance, if I was to get a poor, weak person and ask them what they would do, they're probably less likely to take drastic action other than someone who's invincible and so powerful in a way. Once the Chinese people gain power, they've proven it. South China Sea, they're threatening Taiwan more. What they're doing in Hong Kong, they're threatening Japan. They're causing a lot of trouble for the Vietnamese people. They've now threatened the Philippines so much and taken so much of their sea around them that they're scared to even be associated with the United States. It's not top down. It's bottom up. And there's 1.4 billion people. It doesn't mean that they're all bad. It's just that this is what a powerful country does geopolitically. Taiwan is not the same. Taiwan, from the very beginning, had to pander to the West. And Taiwan has consistently had to have these ties with the West. There's there's millions, hundreds of millions of Chinese that know nothing about the West. They know nothing about us. All they know is that we are these evil white people that caused the 100 years of humiliation. This is the mentality from within China, and if it was a democracy, imagine what they would be capable of. I couldn't imagine it. So part of our thought process here is, I hate to tell you guys the real strategy, but the real strategy is that we convince everybody else that the CCP is the bad guys. We break them up and then we destroy the country. That's the real strategy here. I hate to just break it to you guys and give you the real deal, but the real deal is that we want this awful geopolitical threat to collapse from within. And if we can somehow weaken their political structure and convince their own people to do that for us, then the gates of hell will open up and we'll be able to destroy this country. But if this country continues to rise, Australia will become Venezuela. I hate to tell you guys what's really going on, but yeah, it's only a matter of time.
Well, yeah. I mean, they have been quite aggressive in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, with all the countries around them as they continue to expand. And they have, it is getting to a tipping point.
Yeah, and another one I didn't mention is recently they were encroaching on an island off the coast of in Indonesia's region, Natuna Island. They started sending fishing vessels down there. They've been fishing out Asia. We're running out of fish because this massive population is rich, and they're sending armadas of fishing vessels backed by Chinese battleships into poorer nations' regions and fishing out the waters. Not to mention that they are they are responsible for 50% of the world's pollution and global emissions. And then we got some 16-year-old girl who can't even tie up her own shoelaces trying to tell us to get our countries in order, and she's never mentioned China once. I can keep ranting if you want.
No, it's fine. So the question is with this coronavirus, with the CCP being so tied to GDP growth in order to maintain social stability and social order, will the CCP survive? That is the core question. There are the population is aging at a rapid rate. What do you think? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. This is kind of new in modern history. I mean, there was a H1N1 outbreak as well. There was SARS before that. China has managed to overcome, and the CCP has managed to overcome these problems. The country has been through worse. The Chinese people just take this on the chin? Yeah. Is it just play on?
It is play on. They take it on the chin, and they have one of the strongest jaws in the world. They can take it on the chin. They can take anything that we can throw at them. I don't see China as a threat just because they're bad. They're competent. They're intelligent in their ways that they overcome problems. That if they were incompetent, I wouldn't even bother talking about them. If they were just North Korea. This is a competent, smart, well-oiled machine that can overcome anything. And this is just a little bump in the road. China is a huge behemoth that will overcome anything. And if anything, this will make them stronger, because they will have, after this, they will have systems in place to overcome future diseases. They've just been helped, and they're going to continue to grow. This is a huge threat to Asia, and people have been saying that, it's going to destroy China's economy. they've been saying that for the last decade, really, since people started to wake up to China as a threat. And it hasn't happened, and it won't happen. Keep in mind, a lot of the largest empires throughout history went through uh, massive depressions just before they became great. America did the same.
Yeah, yeah. This could be definitely just be a dearth as well, and that's the thing, because you never allow you never miss a wasted opportunity, right? So this is an opportunity in the eyes of the CCP, as much as it is a disaster, and this is a time for purging out, political opponents in Hubei province. They do this every single time. You purge out your political opponents, you put in stronger people, and you more efficiently generate systems that control the population. And I think they're doing that. Of course, the social credit system, a horrible system, but this is a more of an excuse of an excuse of why there should be implemented strategies such as the social credit system there in China, which it dissolves all individual sovereignty, all individual rights. You're being monitored 24/7. I mean, this is worse than a Big Brother complex. What you buy is monitored, right? I mean, isn't this is awful, and they want to export this model overseas.
Yeah, so you mentioned opportunities, and this is a great opportunity, and it has worked better than I think anyone's realized. We have Sinophile, I don't know what to call them other than stupid people in the media, that have now started pitching the Chinese Communist Party line in our own media. So if someone comes from China, where we know that the origin of this deadly illness that has killed people, coughs next to you on the train and you move, you're now a racist. Our own media has started to push that. And what has happened is the Chinese people, even people with 1% of Chinese within Australia and Western countries, are now more united than ever because they feel that this is a racist attack on them. They created this disease, and now we are the racists for not wanting to catch it. The only way to not be seen as a racist is to die from coronavirus. You just see it on the gravestone. Wasn't racist, died from coronavirus. Media like this person. And even myself,
This is echoed in the Global Times as well, where they're claiming that the West's response to the coronavirus has been immoral, it's been racist, and it's been at the same time in line with the yellow peril mythology.
yeah, and I've been
They do these attacks. I think the West is just trying to look after its own interests. It's trying to look after the interests of China and the world at a whole. To make sure this doesn't turn into a global epidemic, of epic proportions. And yet the Global Times, the CCP's mouthpiece, will have these little stabs. It will make these little attacks. On good policy, right?
It has worked. See, one of the biggest problems that I have to deal with is, okay, well, I live in Australia. I don't want Australia's economy to collapse. I don't want Australia to be surrounded by Chinese military bases. China's the one doing all of these evil things, really. People complain about America, but what has happened recently is the CCP, one of their biggest talking points is that if we don't allow them to have their way geopolitically, we're racist. Well, this has worked. Even recently, I had some guy that's like half Chinese. He was born in Australia, sending me death threats because I'm talking about the coronavirus. And he's posting things like, oh, well, I must be half coronavirus because I'm half Chinese. This has worked perfectly for the Chinese Communist Party to subvert our own country. Not to mention America. We have journalists writing articles about how they the slightest little bit of racism they had to suffer, and then they write an article about it. And the reason why these articles are doing so well is because immigration has allowed people in that identify as Chinese or Asian, and white people are the enemy. That's pretty much the only way that I can see it. Uh, and it's worked perfectly. And how this is going to play out over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm not exactly sure, but it has it has divided the country more than I think people. We haven't been able to measure it just yet. Maybe in the next 12 months we'll understand how bad this damage is. So it's like China has this deadly disease, and we have to suffer from this political backlash from it, which is just, it's unfair, but the world is unfair, and I don't think that our media or the Australian people are aware yet of the damage that this has done.
Yeah, it is sad that we can't work for a better cause without political backlash. Another thing that's happening in China news is the continued expansion of Belt and Road Initiative. They're pushing on with that at a huge pace. Despite the coronavirus, I mean, they're having troubles with Russia. The border was shut down, for example. But something that you have been talking about and you are interested in is Iran. Now, Iran, big geopolitical headache for the United States and for a lot of the people in that region. What is happening with the news over there in China and Iran, Sino-Iranian relations? What's going on?
Okay, well, I guess part of the problem is, I need to address this first, is that in countries like America, in Australia and Britain, we don't fully understand what what pays the bills and what is really happening geopolitically. They don't fully understand the threats that we face, and that the world is really a malevolent world through geopolitics. It is really mighty's right out there, and if we are not mighty, we will have to be the weak that suffer, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the world is like that, but it's also unfortunate that people don't quite understand that. So recently, about a month ago, I was on, as I told you before, I had a talk with Stefan Molyneux on his channel, and he's obviously pro-peace, anti-war, etc. And the goal of me having an hour and a half, I think it was almost 2 hour talk with him, was to my point of view is that we're part of an alliance system, and if our alliance system breaks down, we become poor, and our countries break down into civil war, etc. And his point of view was that there shouldn't be any war at all. And my point of view is obviously that if we are weak, we will be hurt badly by our enemies. So at the end of that hour and a half conversation, I believe that I convinced Stefan Molyneux of the reason why we needed to be in Iran. And that video did not go live. I guess that's the problem. That's what you have to deal with when you're a social media person talking to an expert. I can give you facts and I can convince you of how the world really works. Imagine if John Mearsheimer and Stefan Molyneux had a chat.
I would pay to see that.
I would
They should
love to
put that
see
in the
that.
wrestling arena with
Oh,
lights and everything.
oh, Hugh White, that was pretty tame. I'd love to see John Mearsheimer tear this guy apart, because then he'll really wake up philosophy and human rights. Welcome to the real world, bro. What the hell? He's like in this I don't know, bro life sort of weird. I don't know how the guy thinks, but anyway, that video obviously didn't go live because facts trump philosophy. Iran. Now, 6 months ago, John Mearsheimer arrived in Australia and he gave a little talk. I went to that talk and he told us before our politicians told us that we were going to blockade Iran. The media obviously didn't like that. They asked a few questions saying, hang on, our politicians haven't told us. Well, the reason why John Mearsheimer tells us first is because John Mearsheimer and all of the people with PhDs that are experts in their field, they remain there. It doesn't matter who the president is. So all those people that complain about Trump, doesn't matter. When Trump's gone, the same advisors, the people with PhDs, the experts, they're going to remain because their job is to keep America safe. Why don't people understand this? Doesn't matter who's in charge because it's their job to take all of the public criticism for what the country needs to do to protect itself. Now, as I said 6 months ago, they came out, the experts, and they told us what we needed to do. The Australian people who like to complain about ScoMo and like to think that voting Liberal or Labor actually matters, their job is to do what America tells them because we are a part of an alliance system. They can't just say no. That's just ridiculous. Scott Morrison can't just say, oh, and it's not necessarily to Trump, it will be to the experts, the strategic experts within America that say, look, we need this from you. And where do you think they bought all of these this military hardware in the first place? They bought it from America, most of it. And so this is how it works. This is how the real world works. And we're over there blockading Iran because China and Russia is backing Iran because they're doing their best to control the Middle East and destroy the petrodollar. If they destroy the petrodollar, America becomes weak. If America becomes weak, America gets kicked out of Asia and Australia becomes a third world shithole like Venezuela overnight. Welcome to the real world. This is Iran versus Saudi Arabia. This is why the guy Soleimani was bombed in Iraq. Why was he bombed in Iraq? What was an Iranian general doing in Iraq in the first place? The media hasn't even said this. Iran is controlling Iraq. Syria is controlled by Russia now, and Turkey's got involved. What's next? Because that's how it is. As the dominoes fall, which country's next? Israel, Saudi Arabia, Oman and Yemen, if you look underneath the map as well, Iran's pushing up. If anything, Iran has been the Middle Eastern hegemon for probably the last 20 years. And now they're the ones doing all the aggressive moves. What was a general doing in Iraq? Has anyone even asked that? What is the media even saying? What was it like? If there's an American general in a country, people would ask that question. What was an American general doing there? He was obviously killing people, right? He was obviously doing something that generals are. That's their job. He's a general. Making serious moves in Iraq. And Iraq is the buffer country in between Iran and Saudi Arabia. If Iran totally controls Iraq, Saudi Arabia's surrounded by enemies and weapons and missiles, and the petrodollar could expire, the American dollar could collapse, and if our boss collapses, we become unemployed. That's just pretty much how it works. If there's no aircraft carriers and no American bases in Asia, how do you think our ships full of coal and resources are going to safely travel through the South China Sea, considering China already hates us and we're in a diplomatic freeze with them? I hope that kind of explains it in simplistic terms.
Yeah, the world is waking up. Geopolitics is really coming alive now. History itself is being reactivated as the US withdraws from around the world, which leaves all these independent states, whether that be Iran or Iraq or Turkey. Turkey's a huge country that's coming online. As the US leaves, all these countries are being activated, and they're all grabbing for their natural place in their regional order. Turkey, its natural place in its regional order is the Ottoman Empire, for example, and it wants to reclaim that. That's Turkish ambitions, whereas Iran would like to maintain its very tough geopolitical position as being Iranian. And a lot of other countries, it's destabilization is the ploy, except for a country like Saudi Arabia, where they need a stabilizing force. For example, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we're waiting for Israel, for example, to invade the West Bank again. That's coming down the pipeline. I'm looking at reports from Parliament, and basically they have two timelines there. They have two timelines, but essentially that war is coming. I mean, that's a war that's going to come, and that will ignite the whole Middle East all over again. And China wants a chunk of that. Again, to destroy what's left of the petrodollar cycle. Not that the petrodollar cycle is fading out of history now. It's kind of run to that course. Of course, the shale oil revolution being all in full swing, where America now has the oil capacity and it can disengage from the Middle East. But America might as well hang on to the petrodollar cycle just to stop it from becoming the petro-yuan cycle, which is really what China would like. They would like the petro-yuan and the only way they could do that is with Iran, because Saudi Arabia right now won't technically do that, and Saudi is looking at all sorts of ways to get its money the hell out of there. It's investing all over the place. It's investing billions now into Bangladesh. I don't know why. I wouldn't be putting my money in Bangladesh, but they obviously see big potential in Bangladesh. India is still asleep at the wheel. Modi, trying to drum up some nationalist fervor. Overtaking. What's his name up there? That place that they're fighting with Pakistan. I just forgot the name of it. Kashmir. India are taking over Kashmir, but that's a US-driven policy because they're trying to slowly stamp out this Pakistan Chinese intertwining through the Belt and Road Initiative. It's hard, and China is pushing hard. It's trying to branch out. It's trying to buy friends in the area, but at the same time, I mean, looking at northeast China, looking at Japan, looking at South Korea, looking at Taiwan, looking at the Philippines, looking at Indonesia now, which is getting very, very upset with China, as you mentioned correctly. Illegal fishing is storming up, and Joko down there in Indonesia getting very, very upset with China over the illegal fishing activities that are going on. But that's not all. Vietnam obviously very upset with a lot of the activity, both on the land border and with the dams being built. They're trying to dam up all the water. There are water wars going on there. So this is and the Philippines, being intimidated, as you said. It's not necessarily that Duterte hated the US and hated Obama, and that's why they swung away. But it's more that they are being intimidated into submission, and they do kind of want the United States there for protection, but they're being intimidated. And increasingly, this South American play as well, that China is trying to infiltrate South America, whether massive investments in Argentina, for example, trying to get in there, trying to get in slowly into Brazil, but America's swooping in hard. Mike Pence just did a round middle of last year where he went down to South America and tried to reassert American sovereignty, and Brazil electing Bolsonaro, very pro-U.S. president, to try and... So this is a global play. It's a global play, Dave. China is all over the map. They're all over the global map. They're trying to catch up to the United States in all the ways they can. But they've got troubles at home. They've got the coronavirus. That's a trouble. That's some trouble there. And yeah, but the geopolitical stuff is it's here to stay. It's here to stay. And this Iranian play, Iran and this meshing of using Iran as a bullbrick in the Middle East between Russia and China is a smart move. I would call it a smart move. Iran, very stable country in most ways. They can survive a lot of stuff. This Soleimani incident, Iran's survived. They've recovered, and they're going to play on. And Iran is very, very good at doing that. Iran is a big network in this global play. Whether you're talking trade, whether you're talking military, whether you're talking currency, petro-yuan or petrodollar cycle. And Iran still has, they still have that access to that Strait of Hormuz, that didn't go away. I mean, maybe it doesn't affect the United States so much, but it's still huge for the regional players. And that's the other reason that China has to be friends with Iran, is because they don't want Iran having leverage over them, just like Iran had leverage, or still has leverage, over the United States. So they actually have to be friends with Iran to protect their own oil capacity and their own trade capacity.
So on the topic of America being so important to Australia, I think when people hear that we are helping America in these wars all around the world, they don't often hear all of the things that America does to keep Australia safe. So, for instance, on the topic of oil, Australia produces a form of sweet crude, and we almost have a monopoly on sweet crude oil. Now, the thing is, oil coming out of the Middle East has approximately 20% sulfur in it. And the governing body which America controls can control the level of sulfur. And last month, the governing body, which is controlled by America, has reduced the amount of sulfur allowed in the tankers leaving the Middle East to approximately 10%, I believe. And when you have crude oil coming out of the Middle East that has sulfur, the only way to reduce the amount of sulfur is to add sweet crude oil. So the governing body, which is controlled by America, has changed the laws so that these Middle Eastern countries have to buy more sweet crude oil from Australia. Why? To help our economy, because this is just one of the many things that America does for us, that the average Australian goes to the pub and talks about America being a warmonger and etc. and all these bad things about America. But the high standard of living that we enjoy, the freedom that our maritime trade enjoys, all of the goodies that Australia enjoys comes from this global hegemon. And this global hegemon is constantly tweaking the rules and the laws around the world to benefit us. And this is why I'm so anti bringing too many people into this country that are pro-China, because if we become too pro-China, this country will collapse and a new aristocratic society will emerge, and they will be the Han Chinese, and you and me still, we will become the peasants in the street. That's a domino effect that's happening, and
more and more, from the academic world or for politicians, if you and increasingly in the media, The Americans are warning us against this. Hillary Clinton most famously came down and she said, basically Dave Lee is right. Dave Lee is correct, and you've got to guard yourself against it. This is a command from the United States because geopolitically we need you and you need us, and therefore you better do what we say, and that is protect your sovereignty in some of these ways. That's a command from America. And I think the thing is, with the left in this country, they don't want to heed a lot of those commands. They don't want to, listen to that. And if they don't, then they, especially in their own ignorance, will end up on the street.
Suffer. They will suffer themselves because a lot of these people, they're just say, for instance, this Ricky guy that was sending me death threats, he's half Chinese. By attacking me, he's in fact attacking himself. By weakening me or trying to affect me, he's only hurting his own future in this country. And he's not smart enough to look at himself in the mirror and realize that he wouldn't be accepted in China. He can't speak Mandarin. And we're flooded with these, dummies that are unaware of how important America is and what I say is so important. And more recently, that's why I've started to look at the channel and realize, okay, well, there's views on the channel, there's support on the channel, but it's not big enough. I've realized that the average Aussie hasn't really been supporting my channel enough to the point where I'm considering stepping back and just giving up on Australia. It's almost at that point. It does feel like we're not awake enough. I have conversations with everyday Aussies every day, and what they deem to be the most important things for Australia, I just have to disagree with. Whether Labor or Liberal get in power is literally one of the least important things in this country. It really is, because they're pretty much, if you look at the policies, they're pretty much the same thing. And then all the leftists out there, I don't even know what a leftist is. I don't really know what their idea is. It's we'll just wait till Australia destroys itself. I don't know what their ideology is. I don't even know what a leftist is. I like to think of myself as a leftist. Actually, I like to think of myself as quite left. But it's maybe they don't understand the proper definition of left, or maybe I don't. But if this country's poor and we're homeless and none of our ships can leave without having Chinese guns point at them, we become Venezuela, and it doesn't really matter who's in charge. It doesn't matter if you're left or right. You're just poor.
For the Americans, just a lot of Americans might be rolling their eyes who aren't really, watch this channel. They might be rolling their eyes and saying you're over dramatizing it. But
Yep.
Dave, tell them and remind them what happened in Sydney Harbour. We all woke up one day, and suddenly there was a bunch of ships in Sydney Harbour. The government hardly knew what was going on. The Lord Mayor of Sydney didn't know what was going on. What was that? And what was the psychological impact of that? Explain that whole scenario to the two people. And if this happened in America, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN would be going ballistic. Fox would be calling for nukes. But what happened to us? How did it change our psychology? And why are we talking about this stuff?
Oh yeah, the Chinese ships that came into the harbour. Well, the Australian Navy knew about it, and the Australian government knew about it as well. I guess they just didn't tell everybody because they were worried about it getting out. But when ships arrive in the harbour, it does, and they park themselves right behind the Opera House. The average Aussie in the street knows that China is our enemy. They understand it at a basic level, but when an enemy ship arrives, and China is our enemy, China is not our friend, and any person living in Australia that tells you that they are our friend is an enemy of you. China is the enemy. They're a geopolitical threat. And that's why there was such panic when it happened. But I can't say that it wasn't planned for and they didn't know about it. The Australian Navy had soccer games planned and sports and events planned with the Chinese Navy when they arrived. And there was really an oiler. There was really only a few of them there. There wasn't like a big threat, but yeah, I don't see that as a big problem myself. But it did wake up a lot of the Australians, and you're right about that, because if you visually see it, then you start to realize, oh wow, this is really happening. It's not just people, crazy conspiracy theorists like me ranting and crazy stuff. And that's usually what happens is it doesn't just, people warn you about things, and then when it happens, you really get a slap in the face and a big wake-up call. And that happened with the GFC as well. That happens throughout history. Winston Churchill was warning about the Nazis. He was one of the first people out there saying that the Germans are about to go on a rampage. No one listened to the guy until people started dying in the streets. And that's our future anyway. I'm 100% certain that is the future of Australia. And I'll see you guys in the next 15 years when it happens. Hopefully I'm not here to see it.
Well, yeah, it is quite precarious, the scenario. We're not as far away as people think. We're not as isolated as people think, and we are a very big target with a very underpopulated and with a lack of national defense policy is quite lax, and we have a lot of islands that are exposed to. Drawing us into a sort of conflict that are quite, Christmas Island, for example, it's isolated, it's easy target, and it would draw you into a war quite quickly.
There's another thing I'd like to point out is, I'm saying a lot of pro-American things, but part of America's geopolitical plan, if you have a look at all of these countries, like for instance, Australia, okay, don't worry about having your own manufacturing. Don't worry about building cars. Don't worry about having steel works so that you can build your own battleships. Don't worry about that. Just dig holes, put them on ships, and we'll worry about the protection of you. That's America's job, right? So we've different. America's job is really to protect all these countries, and we just keep it simple. We dig holes. And if you have a look at Saudi Arabia doesn't have any manufacturing. They don't have any local industry at all. What do? They just pretty much dig holes. They drill and they take oil out of the ground. That's all they do. And if you look at and compare them to Iran's economy isn't based on oil. Did you know that? I don't know if most people are aware of that.
There's a tiny little amount of oil in the south, and that's about it. Mostly it's...
No, Iran has a lot of oil. But most of their GDP comes from manufacturing. Iran has had to...
Yeah, it's an internal economy because they've had so many sanctions on them for so long. The stock market is actually quite large, but yeah, it's mostly internal buying and selling.
People are investing, they're risking. It's only just kind of been opened up, but you can buy Iranian toothbrushes and biscuits and toothpaste and all these little things that China produces. Iran is the manufacturer for the Middle East. And that's something I'm not sure if most people are aware. You can have a look at it yourself. You can Google it and check it out. But Iran's economy isn't entirely based off oil, even though they are a very oil-rich nation. they manufacture, and one of the negatives for those people that hate America out there, one of the negatives is that we become complacent and we don't have our own Holden. We're not building cars. We're not building boats. We're not manufacturing things. Because we just rely on America to do most of the heavy lifting, and we just dig holes. And that's part of the reason why a lot of Australians have kind of become complacent, lazy, intellectually dumb as well, because they're not aware of where money really comes from. We just think we dig holes and we get rich off that. But countries like Iran have had to deal with the reality of the situation, and it's a manufacturing hub. That's part of the reason why their economy is so diverse, because they have to deal with the reality of the situation. And I just thought I would play devil's advocate there for those out there that are saying America's evil.
Well, yeah, like so this World Bank group here, the country overview, it says Iran has an estimated gross domestic product in 2017 of 447.7 billion, population of 80.6 million people. Iran's economy is characterized by the hydrocarbon sector, agriculture and services sector, and is a noticeable state presence in manufacturing and financial services. Yeah. Iran ranks second in the world in natural gas reserves and fourth in proven crude oil reserves. Yep. Economic activity and government revenues still depend to a large extent on oil revenues and therefore remain volatile. And that's why when the sanctions that's why they target those through the sanctions there. But yeah, so it says here, Iranian authorities have adopted a comprehensive strategy encompassing market-based reforms as reflected in the government's 20-year vision document and the sixth five-year development plan from 2016 to the 2021 period, which is what we're in now. The sixth five-year development plan is comprised of three pillars, namely the development of a resilient economy, progress in science and technology, and the promotion of cultural excellence. On the economic front, the development plan envisages an annual economic growth rate of 8%, and reforms state-owned enterprises, the financial and banking sector, and the allocation of management of oil revenues among the main priorities of the government during the 5-year period. So yeah, pretty much exactly what you said. Huge amounts of hydrocarbons there, but a versatile, financial and agricultural sector and manufacturing, because it has to be an internal economy, because it's not sure who it can trust, and the United States keeps sniping from the outside, with sanctions and things like that. And you invest in Iraq, and then Iraq disappears. Things blow up. So it's not a very stable region. So Iran has to rely on itself. And you're saying Australia should start adopting this same practice.
I'm just playing devil's advocate. We've become complacent, as everybody knows. This isn't not groundbreaking news. Everyone knows that for such a highly educated country, we have universities on every corner, yet we focus on digging holes. And part of the reason why we do that is because we don't need to. And Iran was forced to. Iran is quite an educated country as well. I could be wrong, but I believe Iran is more highly educated than Saudi Arabia.
I think so.
Because they've forced to educate their population, focus on manufacturing, focus on trade, figure out how to overcome these problems. And a nation is far more resilient than they might be aware. But Australia has become lazy and complacent, and part of the free trade system that we got here is that we can't really have Holden doing well because part of our alliance system is with Japan, and Japan sells Toyota. And it doesn't make sense for us to compete with an ally, and it's a very complex free trade system that America has organized, and it works well. The problem is if America was to become weakened by China geopolitically, that entire house of cards will collapse. And imagine Australia trying to dig holes at the same price when our dollar falls to literally nothing, and we have all these educated people but no factories to manufacture anything, and we're an isolated nation. I've put all of these factors into my overarching theory as to how the country's going to collapse, and yeah, it's just so obvious to me when you look at all these factors, really. And
What do
that's
you
why
think? What do you think about New Zealand? Is New Zealand in the same perilous scenario as us, or is it a little different?
worse. Well, for pretty much forever, Australia has been kind of the little regional hegemon, our own little South Asian leader. And New Zealand has always been our Canada. They have to do what we tell them. But more recently, they've been signing free trade agreements since 2008 with China, and started to show a little bit more bravado and almost like break away as if they've forgotten about the Anzacs. The hierarchy of power has slowly been deteriorating. New Zealand needs to be aware that Australia is the leader in our little area and back us and listen to us, and we need to listen to America. That's really the hierarchy of power. And if that breaks down and we start doing our own little thing, our system breaks down, and a more stronger system will come in and smash us, and they'll smash us hard. And that system is being created by China. And we don't necessarily know where Indonesia, what their position is in this whole system. But I dare say, if I was Indonesia, I would be siding with China. If I was Indonesia, I would be siding with China. That's just from an Indonesian point of view. I would be secretly having talks and preparing for becoming the South Asian power that helps China.
What does this mean for domestic politics in both New Zealand and Australia? Is there going to be, regardless of what's happening with your channel and you, do you think there will be a larger growth of anti-CCP, political parties and networks, or do you think, and obviously there's a lot more growth of pro-CCP parties and networks, do you think there's going to be a divergence here? Do you think the CCP is going to become the big topic at some point? Is there a tipping point? Or do you think the people are going to be still consumed by talking points of Labour, Liberal, for example, the economy and whatever. Do you see Do you see a revolution in the works?
Very good question. And you and me, we have access to Western media. The Chinese people who live in Australia, they don't watch Channel 7, 9, 10, ABC, SBS. They think it's ridiculous, even though that media kisses their ass. It's funny. Our media is kissing the Chinese people in this country's ass. I have to say it as crude as that, because that's really how they're behaving. But the Chinese people in this country, it's already been divided. We are divided straight down the middle. The Chinese people in Australia watch Chinese news. They watch Australia Today or SydneyToday.com. You guys can check it out yourself. This is a CCP-run enemy news organization, classifieds. It's where they get their jobs. It's where they get their news, their information, everything from a CCP-run website in Australia. And this app is on every 100% of every Chinese person's phone in Australia. That media does not pander to Australia. That media continuously says how bad white people are and how stupid our politicians are and how great China is. And every single Chinese person in this country uses that app. Sydney Today or AustraliaToday.com. You guys can check it out yourself. WeChat. WeChat is another app that 100% of Chinese people use. We are already living in a digitally divided country. It's just that the average Australian has no idea that it's happening because they're watching ABC and SBS. ABC and SBS is supposed to be our media, but they kiss the Chinese people's asses
Do
because
you
they've
think
been
people were surprised when they saw, the Liberals campaigning on WeChat? When they did, ScoMo did those ads for WeChat, and talked to the people on WeChat. Was this one of the moments where the people started to wake up and they started to say, "Oh, we
no,
are"?
no, the people are still sleeping. The people are not awake. The Australian people will only wake up when the ships arrive in the harbour next time. They're still sleeping. And I have a channel that has received millions of views. I can, as you know, you can go through your analytics and you can get some accurate information, not to mention Facebook and other ways that I gather information. Not to mention speaking to people like you as well, and speaking to average Aussies in the street as well that will approach me in the street. People are sleeping, they don't see the threat, and when they become unemployed and they lose political power in this country, it will be too late. It's already, the pendulum is halfway and it's about to fall. That's where we're at. But like every massive geopolitical play throughout history, the general population is the last people to know because but you've got, I'm frustrated obviously because I'm out here yelling and screaming and ranting every day, and I don't have even a fraction of the support that I need to get the message out. The Australian media would prefer to pander to our enemy within the country. And it's not like you're a Polish Jew just before World War II. You've woken up, it's 7 a.m. You had a little shower, you put your suit on, you're on your way to work. Just an everyday occurrence. This is just, it's Monday morning or whatever. And then the German troops come in, grab you, and put you in a gas chamber or put you up against the wall and shoot you, and you're like, oh, how did that happen? The Australian people have no excuses. They have no excuses. It's not like back then when they barely had some sort of radio to get information, and the only information really you'd get from was a newspaper once a day that was written the day before or 2 days ago. They have access to the entire world, and they have access to shows like this. You and me discussing these type of topics. This video that this conversation that we are having right now should have 25 million views if the Australian people were awake. But it'll probably only get 200 views. There's only really 200 people out there that are awake, and they're probably watching this video now, and out of that 200 people, there might be 50 that disagree. The country's screwed. I can't put it any other way.
Do you know Hugh White personally?
No, I don't.
I'd
Never
love
met
to
him.
have Hugh White on the show. What a great. He wrote some great books. I read his books. The China Challenge, for example. What have you got up there? You got any? How to Defend
Yeah.
Australia. Yep.
You see that one? Yeah, you see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
we
I would love to see him on your show too.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. He'd be fantastic. He's knowledgeable. If I have him on, I'm inviting you on as well. Obviously, for
Love to
certain.
see you. I'd love to see you get him on. I think experts in the field, that talk about these topics, they have credibility. Hugh White was on that ABC program that they have on the Mondays. I forgot what the
Oh,
name
yeah.
of it. I don't watch this crap. It's just crap. But he went on there and he was ridiculed.
Hmm.
An expert in the field that wrote he worked on the 2000 white paper to defend Australia. He wrote books like this. He's got a PhD in this field, and he was ridiculed on ABC. What's it called? ABC, that
Is
panel
it
discussion.
Outsiders? Or is it Q&A?
Q&A. That's it. Q&A. And it was like he was the idiot, and he was the only one in the room with a PhD. Come on, people. Come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
He
it's
also he suggests that there's in his book that it is so dangerous for Australia right now that maybe we should sever our ties with the United States and develop our own nuclear weapons. This is a guy who spent his life in strategic studies. He's an expert in the field, and he's warning us. This book's only new last year, yet the Australian people would rather worry about whether this business or that business is being privatized, or whether Liberal or Labor get in, and complain about ScoMo, even though the funny thing is, if you're a football team and your football team's the weakest football team, you can't complain about the coach or the captain. There's only a matter of time you can continue to complain about the coach or the captain. Australia's weakening, and you can complain about ScoMo or whatever leader we have in charge. But when the country's weak, they're not Superman. They can only manipulate the resources that they have in front of them. It's basic economics. They only have over what's in front of them. And
Yeah, no, you was here the whole time. Well, this has been a really good talk, and I want to thank you. I don't want to take up too much of your Sunday. It's a good day to go and have a rest. So, thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you wanted to announce? I mean, you're announcing maybe retiring from YouTube. Maybe it's all in the works. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or announce while we're still here?
I know it's Sunday, but you get me started, and I can talk all Sunday. Get me started. This is a serious threat. Australia is seriously under threat. We are facing problems that we have never faced in our history since 1788.
The difference between the threat against Australia and the threat against the United States is different, right? I just want to make that clear to people, because a lot of people will say, they're Americans, and they'll say, oh, it's not a threat, it's this and that. But unless you're an Australian,
Okay,
you won't really get it.
America is the global police to some extent, and people say that they do bad things, but this police, the American police, their job is to protect their allies, not their enemies. Of course not. We are an ally of America. So if America weakens a little bit, America is always going to be safe. For the Americans out there, your country is safe. Don't worry about it, because you're not going to have a civil war. All of those conspiracy theorists out there that think that America is going to collapse into civil war, it is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my life. You have military personnel all around the world. And if you're out there controlling trade routes and maritime routes all around the world, and something happens back home, all you have to do is stop controlling one little region and bring those troops home, and everything will be just fine. So don't worry about that, America. If you lose control over Asia, where do you think all those troops, all of those aircraft carriers, all of those bases, where do you think all the money that you're spending into that will go? It'll go back to America. And short term, you will get a short-term boost to your economy. Yes, you'll get a good 10 years. And then after that, the decline would be far more rapid than you would have ever imagined. You get a little boost, you'll have all the troops come back, and then all of the expenses will increase because you don't control that region. You don't. You're offering up these regions of the world, and the money that comes from controlling those regions, you will not have that income anymore. That's pretty much how it works. But when Australia loses America and America leaves Asia, Australia collapses. America will also lose the help that Australia gives you in all of the public ways and all the private ways that you guys don't know. We help you guys out so much, and you guys help us out so much. It's a mutually beneficial, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement, alliance that we have here. But when we collapse and our political structure is overturned and it's replaced by Han Chinese, we will be doing China's bidding from now on, from that point on, and you will lose. So when Australia loses, America loses as well. Short term, you might get a little boost for selling off this asset. Maybe China might even buy a region of the world from you and give you, if you want to become a socialist, you want to get Bernie Sanders in there, and you want to or you want to get Andrew Yang in there, who's just another fruitcake that he's got an economics degree, but he has no idea about economics. He just wants to give free money to people. And he doesn't understand Milton Friedman at all because he misrepresents his theories. And you just give free money to people, eventually your economy will collapse. Maybe this generation will do okay, but slowly but surely you will decline and shrink back to your region of the world. So Americans out there, don't worry. You will always be rich. You will always be, especially if you are alive now, your generation will be fine. But your allies like Australia, our country can be destroyed far more rapidly. And China wants to do that. And if you care about human rights and you care about your friends over here, I suggest that you care about our lives, because our lives do matter. Hate to use that pun, but yeah.
It's a good hashtag. It's a good hashtag. Our lives do matter. Yeah, so no, they really do. All lives matter.
Change it. Hashtag Australian lives matter. Please help Australia, America, and wake up. And also, Americans out there, if you're in the chat, I can't see the chat. I'm assuming that people are saying something in the chat.
Yeah.
This is bipartisan. To you Americans out there, this is bipartisan. It doesn't matter who is Republican, Democrat. It doesn't matter. What the people with the PhDs that are behind the political parties, they really pull the strings, and it's bipartisan. China is your enemy. It doesn't matter who's in charge. China is your enemy. And hashtag save Australia.
Mike DeVerde says, well, I'm an American and I love Australia. So there you go. That's Mike DeVerde out there.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We have one vote for Australia. Now another 350 million of them.
Well, that's one more. That's one closer, you know. So
Thank you. We have one. It's a start.
It's a start. Well, you know, thank you very much for coming on the show, Dave. Always good to get the China update from the one of the best voices on the internet to do with China. I'd like to see you on China Uncensored one day. I think that would be great. I think you have the knowledge and the wherewithal and the ability.
He's doing an amazing job. It would. I doubt he's getting much thanks from people out there, but he's doing an amazing job and he works really hard. And sometimes when I will watch think tanks giving, conferences around the world, I'll see Chris Chappell in the audience taking notes. He's a hardworking man. He's got himself a master's as well in political science, I believe. I could be wrong. But he's doing a good job, and he's pretty much one of the only ones out there doing it. I'm the Australian version of China Uncensored. I'm pretty much the Australian version. But we do need, I guess, if there's not just China Uncensored, I believe every country should have its own. I would like to be Australia's Well, I am, because there's no one else out there doing it. But I believe Britain should have their own version of me, and Canada, because the mainstream media isn't doing a good job. They really aren't. They're not,
You know, the CSIS is a really great organization, the
yeah,
Center for Strategic and International Studies. And, you know,
yeah,
their China part, it says here, the CSIS research on China seeks to advance popular understanding and inform U.S. policy on the global implications of the country's rise. And it says here, quote, arguably the most pressing geopolitical challenge of the 21st century, China's growing military, economic, and technological capabilities present unique and enduring dilemmas for U.S. policymakers and stakeholders. In order to help shape the U.S. response to a rising China, the CSIS conducts research and analysis that spans the bilateral relationship. This is from America to China, obviously, and focuses on pressing issues. Our work on China is led by the Freeman Chair in China Studies, the China Power Project, and the Chinese Business and Economic Programs. Find the latest research. So I would encourage people to check out the Center for Strategic and International Studies. These guys do great work, whether that video form, conferences, think tanks, a lot of great articles coming out of there. There's a lot to learn about China. China's a very interesting country, but the CSIS does a really, really good job of their analysis is top notch. Do you agree?
yeah. People often will complain about Donald Trump making decisions, but these think tanks make the decisions, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the figurehead who takes all of the abuse from the public. When these think tanks explain how much of a threat China is and we need to do this, we need to put tariffs on. It's funny how the media says, oh, this is Donald Trump's tariffs. They're not Donald Trump's tariffs. They're not at all. They're the guys with PhDs that have spent their lives trying to protect America that say, look, we need to do this or this. Peter Navarro, I believe, was one of the figureheads. He was pushing hard against China. He made a video. He's a friend of John Mearsheimer's, by the way. These are the guys that make the policies. It doesn't matter who's in charge. The person in charge, it's their job to take all of the heat for it. In Australia, I'm not so sure if people like Hugh White have much influence at all, because I've seen Hugh White talk, and the way he talks is, this is what I suggest. I'm not sure if anyone's listening, though. It just feels like that because a multitude of reasons. But in America, the people who are pulling the strings are the experts. Americans, why you didn't become the global hegemon by just putting an idiot in charge. That's not how America became great. Smart people made good decisions. That's how you became the hegemon, or another country would have been the hegemon. That's really how it works. And it's also funny. Another thing I'd like to mention is that Donald Trump's tariffs, but no one ever says that they're Xi Jinping's moves. They say it's China's moves, but really it's a dictatorship over there. So really, they're Xi Jinping's moves, which is just a wordplay that the mainstream media has got totally wrong. And Donald Trump he's getting abused by 50% of the population every day. This isn't a dictatorship. Or 50% of the population, there'll be like 150 million people in jail right now for trash talking Trump. if it was China, I'm not saying he's a good guy, but just understand what's really going on, and it's not a dictatorship, and people making the decisions do have PhDs and they're experts in their field, so just thought to make that point as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good point to make. Well, thank you very much, Dave. I'll let you get on with this Sunday. It's been great as always. we'll keep reading the news and keep us updated with what's going on in China. Obviously, this novel coronavirus impacting China in a significant way. We're yet to see what happens. I mean, this is a developing story. Every day it's changing. There's more, there's less, there's more, there's less. They change the way they calculate it. The trade wars obviously having a significant impact on global affairs as well. The Belt and Road Initiative, the strategic plays in the South and East China Sea are still going on with the Senkaku Diaoyu Island fight. And the Russian border idea, this being shut down, this is another big play. And as you were enlightening us, Iran being a big, a big tool, a big pivot point for a play in Australia and a greater play in the Middle East and on the currency issues of the petrodollar and the petro-yuan cycles. So this is all really interesting. Dave, thanks so much for coming on. And you keep reading and make sure you tell us what you're going to do with your channel. What's going on with that as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Well, that's Detonation, where we're busy putting death out of business.